let us talk about actually a very important thing, a scenario that comes up relatively often in interpreting. This also relates to translation, but I'll start with interpreting. Handling challenges. I was watching a series of clips for California court interpreters, and they actually had a very good explanation of how to challenge somebody, the other flow, right? And they basically said, if you hear a colleague make a mistake, first ask yourself, well, is this crucial and important and material enough to even voice it? And that is correct. That is a very good question. And then if it is, then say, Your Honor, may I have a conversation with my colleague, or blah, 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 and then voice it to your colleague, and ideally let them correct it on the record. This is also very good because you're letting the person themselves correct themselves. And if they disagree with you, then their interpretation stands, unless it's like so vital and crucial to the case that per your professional integrity, you have to say, Your Honor, I disagree with my colleague. And I basically agree, which is very strange for me to agree with a certain protocol, but I actually agree with that protocol. Now, let us talk about what you would do if you are being challenged, not necessarily in court, and how you would deal with it. And that's happened to me, and I think it's happened to everybody. Well, it kind of goes to the idea of just dealing with challenges in life as well, and right and wrong. And we could make a very philosophical clip out of this, except we probably won't. But think about it this way. In life, there is something that is right, and there is something that is wrong. And of course, things are not black and white, but usually people know when they made a mistake if they have made it. Except most of us, to some degree or another, and let me emphasize this again, to some degree or another, like to fight for our own rightness, regardless or irregardless, whichever one you prefer, they're both right. See, there's a cause for argument here. A lot of us like to fight for our own rightness even when we're not right. That's kind of a human trait. It's not a very good one, but it happens. So my call to you, and actually usually I do calls to action at the end, but here I'm going to do one in the middle. For the next week, or at least the next day, try to differentiate what is right and who is right. Like actually, if somebody corrects you and it is a right correction, say thank you, let me fix it, and move on. Don't necessarily fight for what is right when it is not right. But okay, back to handling challenges. So the first would be to analyze that challenge on its own merits, not necessarily feel spiteful and perk up your feathers and get all belligerent about it just because somebody challenged you. So let's say that I'm interpreting and I say river, and my colleague says whatever, actually they said tributary. Well, that is a difference. If they said tributary and I said river, I'd be like, okay, thank you, and correct myself quick and go on. If I said rivulet and they're like, well, actually they said stream, I'd be like, you know, those are actually close enough synonyms for the context. The interpreter stands by their interpretation. So that is the basic and the number one rule. Acknowledge it, admit it, and handle it quickly without feeling in any way apologetic or ashamed if it is a true challenge and correction. And do not apologize, acknowledge the mistake, and handle it if no mistake has been made. Because that's the other side of the spectrum, is some of us will stand by our own rightness, quote unquote, when we're wrong, but some of us will admit fault when no fault exists to be admitted. And that is equally bad, because by doing so, you actually introvert, you self-deprecate, and so on. So if you're right, then stand your ground, whatever it means. I will do that, and that's usually the case with me. Like if I get corrected, most often people learn not to make the same mistake again. I'm not trying to be super arrogant here. I have been corrected correctly. For example, I was in court. There was a Russian-speaking lawyer. That happens very often. If you're in court, the lawyer might speak your language, but they just can't be the one interpreting. And the guy was going back and forth. The witness was going back and forth. He said, at one point, I took my son to McDonald's. Then he said, I took him to fast food places. And then he said it a third time, and he might have said fast food places, and I just sort of dubbed it in and said McDonald's. And the lawyer was like, no, 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 no. He said fast food, not McDonald's. Well, that actually is important for the court context. So I fixed myself. There is nothing to argue about there, right? Or another case when actually the lawyer was very attentive. This was a case when I was interpreting for a Ukrainian lady, but she was speaking Russian, which will happen quite often because it's very often their better language. She said a word which obviously had something to do with the bottom of her shoes, except it was a Ukrainian word. And I did not clarify, which was my first mistake. And I just assumed that it meant heels, but we all know what assumption does, right? And if you don't know, then assuming makes an ass out of you and me. I just said a horrible swear word. Anyway, so I assumed it meant heal, and I said so, except in the context of that deposition, it would have been detrimental to the case because she was suing the clinic for a slippery walkway, and so she slipped and fell. But if she was wearing heels, then, you know, it's her fault. So the lawyer very politely said, would the interpreter like to inquire about the term use? So the interpreter, me, inquired, and it actually meant thick soles. Big difference, right? So I am not flawless, and I made that mistake, and I took the correction because it was a correct correction. You can actually take a correction from somebody who is less qualified than you if it has merits. That's okay. Like authority or rank does not matter. You know, I actually hate it when people try to correct or argue by authority. Well, I'm blah, 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 or I have this experience, or I'm a native speaker, or I'm this, or I'm that. Well, who cares? It's either this or it's that, right? The world is not black and white, but in translation and interpreting, it usually either is a mistake or it isn't in a certain context. So that's how you handle challenges in broadly. Like obviously in different scenarios it will be a little bit different, but also if you are going to correct somebody, again, think how crucial is this correction? Should you be correcting them here and now, or should you just wait till break? Did they just say azure instead of, you know, cerulean blue or navy blue, and how crucial is this going to be to the interpretation? So that's my 2 cents worth or $2 worth or $2 million worth of advice. But my life advice is don't ever care about who is right or who is wrong, but about what is right. For the next week in translation or in life, or at least for the next day, try to use that principle. And I think that actually even your relationships in life, see, now I've become a relationship coach, will improve if you focus on the rightness of the deed versus the rightness of the person. All right. Before the mosquitoes eat us alive, we're going to move to the next clip, and that makes no sense, but I have a right to be illogical. I'll see you guys later.